Hello and welcome to Beebe Book Buzz. This is the program where your Wakefield librarians gather to talk about what we've been reading recently in hopes that we can help you find your next great read. My name is Karen Stern and I'm here from the reference department along with two of my colleagues, Beth Radcliffe and Jeff Clapes. And today I think we're going to start with a brand new book that's out that's been causing a lot of talk.
Yes, I actually
I
decided to talk this one precisely because it's been like a big thing. And in fact, I was very torn because, well, I should tell you what it is first.
I was about to say, we want to know what it is. We're dying to know.
Erin Morgenstern's second book, which is called The Starless Sea, and you probably remember, I think it was about 7 years ago that her first huge, there was a long time between them. Her first huge, well, it was a blockbuster, but it was her first novel. Incidentally, she's local. She's from Marshfield originally. She went to Smith College, so she's kind of a local Massachusetts person. But The Night Circus was a fantasy, but hugely popular. And it was kind of a quirky, hard to pin down fantasy, which I think is what people liked about it. It was
somewhere between fantasy and magical realism. It wasn't, it kind of walked that line.
And it was on the bestseller list for like many weeks. I think it's sold something like 3 million copies, and it's been translated and so forth. It's been optioned for film and all that kind of thing. And I think one of the things that appealed to people about that first book was that she had a lot of influences that were things like Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, and I mean, I'm not saying that. I mean, she has said that she was very much influenced by them. The Prestige, both the film and the book. What else? Einstein's Dreams was another one that she said is one of her favorite books. So the kind of
it was actually about magicians, right? Not just magic in it, but it was about magicians.
So there's been a lot of expectations about what her second book would be, particularly since, kind of like Donna Tartt, it's years between one book and another, so people get very excited about the next one. So there was a lot of talk about this, The Starless Sea, which came out, I believe, in November. Yes, November. And the reviews have been decidedly mixed. So I know a lot of people who were very much looking forward to it were kind of like, oh, I'm not sure I want to read it, and end up being disappointed. But I finally said, it was right after New Year's, and I said, it's cold, I want to curl up and have a fantasy, I'm going to give it a shot. And I wanted something to just get away. And I was pleasantly surprised. I'll talk a little bit about some of the criticisms, but I loved it. And I understand why some of the reviewers...
It's very different, right?
Yes. Yeah. I can understand some of the criticisms that people mentioned, but there have also been some very glowing reviews as well. So I think you have to kind of come into it with your own mind open. I do think if you liked her first book, yes, you will like this. It is not for everybody. I will say the one criticism I would say was probably a little on target is that it's a little self-indulgent. You can kind of almost get the sense that she was really enjoying that sort of self-conscious fantasy writing. But if you just let go, it's so anyway, to tell you what it's all about, this is a story about storytelling, and that's what made me really appreciate it the most. I love the whole concept. That's why I'm a librarian. I love the idea of stories. Whether they're fictional or true stories, they tell us about people's lives. And this is sort of an homage to storytelling. It is a fantasy, and I think people who, it's not a Game of Thrones fantasy, it's more akin to The Night Circus. It's about fate, it's about time, it's about video games, although I have to say, if you are kind of turned off by the idea of video gamer culture, there's almost none of that in it. So other than the fact that a couple of the characters are in that world, it's not really about that, so don't let that turn you off. There's some really wonderful quotes in it. Just what she does with language is great, and I'll start off with one where she says, "A boy at the beginning of a story has no way of knowing that the story has begun." So it's about a boy, actually, an adult graduate student. His name is Zachary Ezra Rollins, and he's a grad student in Vermont. And in the course of his research in the university library, he comes across a book that's a kind of peculiar old book, and as he's reading it, he finds himself in it. There's a whole section that describes in perfect detail an episode that happened when he was a child. And the episode involves when he was living in New Orleans with his mother. He went down an alleyway and there was a painted door on a brick wall that was so realistic he wanted to open it, but he didn't. And that whole thing is described in exactly that way in this book. So he knows it's about him, what's going on. So he starts investigating this, and that leads him through a whole different cast of characters, an underground world. The Starless Sea is, in fact, it's hard to describe. I can't really tell you the plot of the story because there's not a lot of plot. And I think that might be what disturbs some people. It's you have to let go of this. There's a lot of unanswered questions. There's a lot of symbolism and mythology that is not really explained, and some people prefer that. And I was reading a couple of articles that talked about how so many fantasy stories, and I didn't really think about this until I was reading the article, many traditional fantasy stories have at their root some history, some ancient mythology. Some,
Absolutely.
they may be taking off on that, but it's medieval, it's, whatever. And what I actually really like about this is she creates her own mythology that actually has nothing to do with anything else. And it's very disorienting because all these symbols and touchstones don't actually have any relation to ancient Greece or Rome or the Norse gods or Game of Thrones or Tolkien or, none of that's there. You're just kind of left to pull all these pieces together for yourself.
A wholly original
world. I don't think I've read anything quite this original in a while. So anyway, what ends up happening is he meets three main characters. Mirabelle, who in my mind was Kate Blanchett, just
because everyone is in your mind.
Well, yeah,
when you're talking about characters.
No, but then, and she is a protector of this underground place, where stories live and grow and evolve.
Oh, neat.
And it's a maze with shifting physical locations and ports, and it's a whole underground world.
I can see how she can get carried away.
You can totally get carried away. Then there's another character called Allegra, who in my head was Tilda Swinton, just because that's what I was picturing. And she's another protectress of this place, but she's got a different way of doing that, and she's more of a dangerous, evil character that has motivations that are unclear.
Poor Tilda.
Then finally, there's Dorian, who is a storyteller, and he's very handsome, and he's another one of those people where it's kind of hard to tell which side he's actually on. He's Clive Owen. And ironically, well, he's old. He is older in the story, and ironically, I have no one in my head for Zachary. But there are cats, there are bees, there are keys, there are doors that open into other time periods, there are lovers that pass notes under these doors, but it's actually crossing time, and it blows your mind. So you will either be very frustrated by all of that confusion, or if you just let go and enjoy it, it's a magical, magical story.
Cool.
The other thing that I do need to mention that's part of this is it's also almost an Arabian Nights kind of thing, because in between the actual narrative of Zachary and all of this stuff, which bounces back and forth between the characters that are still above ground and those that aren't, she intersperses it with stories that are kind of related to the Starless Sea, almost in the way that 1001 Nights, Arabian Nights, is this constant, a story within a story within a story. And those are delightful because they come out of nowhere and they don't necessarily have anything to do. Some of them do, some of them don't. it's all story. And it's like a dream. It really, some people don't like that, but enough people have that they've kept it at the bestseller list.
Yeah, absolutely.
Despite the...
Well, and her first book wasn't without some of that kind of
Exactly.
controversy either. I mean,
They're original and different. They're not a normal kind of fantasy. You have to go with what she's doing. So another quote that I'll mention is, she says, everyone is part of a story, and what they want is to be part of something worth recording. And I think the best stories feel like they're still going somewhere out in story space. And that's exactly how you feel at the end, which has an interesting and I found very satisfying ending, but you do have the sense that
it spools on.
Everything that was going on in this book is still spooling on in some way that you could kind of make up your own. So
sounds good.
If you are at all disposed to reading Morgenstern because you like this, don't let the reviews
put you off. Yeah.
Just give it a shot. It's great. A lot of fun.
It sounds like it has connections to Shadow of the Wind.
Yeah. Yes.
In that there's all this meta.
There's a lot of meta references,
and
libraries and stories and mysterious characters who are guardians of things that.
But that is all very rooted in the.
That's more rooted in the real world.
Whereas this obviously has that. I mean, the one thing that it does, that is a fantasy trope to end all. That's what having these parallel worlds is very much a fantasy trope that happens in many. But Shadow of the Wind's a little different from that.
It's much more grounded in reality. Yeah, it's true.
But certainly in terms of just the appeal, if you liked the Shadow of the Wind series, I think you would you definitely want to give this a shot.
Yeah, and actually it's funny you say that because I know people that have liked both.
Yeah.
So.
There's no indication that this is the first of a series. I think this is definitely a standalone. But so that's the Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern.
Great. And from fantasy, we go to a little bit of sci-fi.
Fantasy too.
Also, so a genre blend, maybe.
Yes, very much. The book I'm talking about is *The Prey of Gods* by Nikki Dryden, and it's a combination of fantasy, sci-fi, lots of humor and lots of action, and it's a pretty wild ride.
There's robots on the cover.
There's robots on the yeah.
There's the sci-fi. So tell us about the rest.
So it takes place in South Africa, so imagine South Africa, but the year is 2064. And now add demigoddesses, add humans that are getting in touch with their inner animal, their actual inner animal. They're literally actual.
Like
so anyway.
spirit
No,
guides?
not spirit.
No.
Like they physically turn into an animal.
Okay.
And then put in the robots who are artificial intelligent and are becoming sentient. So mix that all together.
Wow.
And then, let's see, what have I forgotten? One of the demigoddesses wants to take over the world. And she wants to take over the world.
Isn't that always the way?
I know. She wants to take over the world using fear and death and destruction.
Okay.
Caused by death.
Bad demigoddess.
With all that said, this book has a lot of depth and gravity to it. It's about identity, love, and acceptance. Who are you? No matter if you're a demigoddess or a robot or a human young girl, an old man, gay, straight, rich, poor, famous, or a drug dealer. It doesn't matter whether you're Zulu or Xhosa or Southeast Asian. Dryden deals with all of this, and she does such an excellent job of it. And I think part of why she's so good at it is that she's a short story writer. So she's used to really squeezing everything in to a tight space, and she's really adept at it. And this is her debut novel after all those short stories.
Is she South African? I'm curious
she
about...
She is not. She's American, but she spent time in South Africa, and she really...
Well, and it just seems like a logical place to set a story that has all these different...
All those things coming together.
different groups and coming together.
She studied in South Africa, and she fell in love with it. So she has 2 other books, and I think they both also take place in South Africa following this. So she's really good at world building too. So she builds that. You start out in a pretty normal South Africa, and then she builds from that. And she says she's building the robots, but she does a great job with these genetically engineered animals too. And she also does a great job with world building, so that she does a great job portraying small communities, small villages, and then anonymous big city. The pacing, it's pretty fast paced because a whole bunch of chapters, short chapters, that short story writing skill again comes in, so it goes pretty quickly. And all the chapters are one of the main characters from one of the other main characters' points of view. All that doesn't hold you the plot really well. She's just throws you curveballs throughout it. You think it's going one way, and then it goes another. And then this happens. And even on the last page, there's a little toss-up there.
That's always good.
Yeah. So red flags, it does have violence. Some people have called it a little bit of horror because of all the gore. I was just able to kind of skim over that. And it does have bad language.
Okay. But you said it also has humor too. I mean, is it?
It does. She's got these, especially with the evil demigoddess, she really shows up there, but there are other places too. Like she describes, she wants world domination, but you have to make sure you're not frumpy looking, that you're really good looking to do your world domination.
You can't be a frumpy demigoddess. No,
yeah, exactly.
It doesn't work.
So
okay.
that's really, it's a lot. It was a fun ride. It really was.
Sounds like it. So they're all a bunch of good escapes for the dark of winter, huh?
Yeah, and if you like Jemison, I know, have you both read Jemison?
I didn't read the whole series, but I read the first
I
one. I loved it. You
Jemison.
went through all of them.
Yeah.
Right?
I think there are parallels to the fifth season. I mean, I think this book is a little wilder and funnier.
Sounds a little lighter generally than
exactly.
Jemison's pretty like
exactly.
you really
you dig down there,
dig deep in.
Yeah, and also Lauren Pubak's Zoo City, which is also fantasy humor and takes place in South Africa.
Okay.
So that's another one to
Great.
try. Yeah. I can't wait to read her other 2 books.
Yeah. Are they sequels or
They're not
they're not
sequels.
related?
They're
Okay.
not.
So
They're not in the same world or
No,
anything. It's
South Africa. I think the 3 of them take place in South Africa.
But not necessarily,
but not
right?
the
Not
same
the same South
No
Africa.
demigoddesses,
No
I think. in that.
demigoddesses. Okay. Well, since we're on the subject of escape, I've been reading a lot of humorous books lately, partly because it just seemed like a good way to, something a
some
little
humor
light.
these days,
We all
too.
need something a little light. And so I'm actually cheating a little bit here. I'm doing this as a kind of a teaser. I'm talking one of my humorous books, which I'm actually going to be doing. This is a teaser for our fireside chat that we're going to be doing next month. And I should just, for those of you who don't know what the fireside chat is, it's kind of an expanded version of this program, but there are more of us. In this case, there are going to be like 7 of us. And we do it live at the library. And
as well as on TV.
As well,
later,
we will do it later also here in the studio. But at the library, what happens is it's very informal chat. We all chat about books, and we each talk about books from themed lists that we have created. So when you walk out of the live session, you walk away with up to 7 lists of books on different themes that
So
you
yours
can.
will be like humor.
So mine will be humor. We have things coming up like not your average ghost stories. We have essays. We have travel writers. We have upcoming fiction. We have graphic memoirs. So we have a little bit of everything, something for everybody, and you can keep referring back to these lists for things to read all through the winter. So if you happen to see this program before the date, which is the live program is February 8th, Saturday, February 8th at 10:30 in the morning. Come on out and join us. Grab some lists. Grab some books. If you don't happen to see this ahead of time, the lists and the books will be on a display at the library. You can come pick them up anytime. So there's my plug. And the reason that I'm doing a humorous book this month and a humorous book next month is because of the Fireside list. So the book that I'm going to talk today is called Nothing to See Here by Kevin Wilson. And you may know him from The Family Fang, which they actually made into a movie, or A Perfect Little World. His books are all, again, I want to say comedy, but I wouldn't, in the kind of panoply of humorous writings, this is not sort of a sitcom exactly. This is a little more towards the absurdist, Coen Brothers side of things. It's like if you're gonna, not that it's all the way over there either,
it's not
but
really black humor, but
it's a little dark and it's absurd, as you're about to see.
Yeah.
So here's the premise. I have to give you a little bit of premise for this one so you get the picture. So the main character is Lillian, and she's down on her luck, living in her mom's attic, heading towards 30. Life hasn't been too kind to Lillian in lots of ways, and she's a little lost. She gets a call for help from her ex-best friend, Madison, who she has not laid eyes on since a particular incident that got Lillian kicked out of their posh Tennessee boarding school years ago. So for the background, Madison is rich and gorgeous and popular, always has been. She was the kind of girl who belonged at this posh boarding school. Lillian is not. Yeah. Lillian was the scholarship girl. Madison was her only real friend at school. And then this thing happened, which I won't give away. These days, Madison is the second wife of a powerful Tennessee senator who is slated to become the Secretary of State.
I thought you were going to say he was going to be our next presidential candidate.
Close enough.
Add to the
it
list.
Maybe in the future. There's always that possibility. So
speaking of absurdity, right?
Yeah.
So the senator has 2 children by his first wife. So these are Madison's stepchildren, and this is where her call for help comes in, the big ask that she has of Lillian. So it turns out that Madison's 2 stepchildren have a condition that, wait for it, makes them spontaneously combust when they get agitated. So it doesn't burn them or anything, but it burns their clothes off and it burns things around them. And so Lillian, who's never taken care of a child in her life, who's never even thought of having children of her own, is now being asked to not only take care of them, but to keep them a secret so that they don't ruin their father's prospects for becoming the Secretary of State. So that's why. So I had to say all that because that's the premise that you're just starting from, right? This is the absurdist premise that you start the rest of the book with, and that's why this humor. This is
Politicians usually do have someone in the background putting out fires, right?
Exactly right. There's definitely metaphors, and you think about that situation, and there's so many places a novelist can go with this, right? I mean, there's lots and lots of possibilities, and he just asks us to accept that baseline. But that's why the humor is not like one-liner stuff or quips and giggles. It's more situational and absurd, and there's some room for social satire as well. So because Lillian, the poor girl, comes to this mansion, this Tennessee mansion where the senator's family has lived for generations, and there's kind of a lot of chance for social commentary about the haves and the have-nots, which again is kind of timely. But mostly it's about Lillian, and it's about her movement through what is obviously she's had a difficult life, and she's given this kind of testing situation. So that's, there are lots of secondary characters too. There's obviously the kids, and there's Madison and the husband.
Are the kids really developed well, or are they?
Well, I would say
are they younger, or
they are younger, and they have good characters and stuff. All of the characters are good, but they're only in service to the story. They're the supporting cast, and Lillian is the starring role. Yeah. So, but it's not to say that they're flat or anything. It's just that that's the reason they're there. And he's a good enough writer that he can bring us like actual, it's moving. You believe in her progression through the story, and she's struggling to find some kind of life where she might be able to shine, although she does get in her own way a lot. So it's. So he seems. I think if you look at his other books like Family Fang. Where the parents are performance artists and they force their children to like live in their performance art. So, they like drag their children into their performance art and make them kind of live in these bizarre situations. He likes this kind of stuff. He likes putting people in these testing grounds and kind of playing out what happens and seeing how they do. I think Perfect Little World is also sort of like that, as a woman who's on her own and pregnant, and she goes to live in this commune, which turns out to be kind of a crazy place, and trying to give a better life for her baby. So that's the kind of thing that Wilson likes to do. So I really enjoyed this. It's again, I wasn't belly laughing, but it keeps you grinning kind of through the whole thing. And it also has, I will say, well. It's a satisfying ending, I will say.
Okay.
It's a satisfying ending. Won't say any more than that.
She doesn't flame out at the end.
I'm not. I'm not going to say any more than that. That's enough. So, Kevin Wilson's Nothing to See Here, and there will be.
I definitely want to read that.
Yeah, it's
great.
definitely. You can read it in a sitting. It's like 250
good.
pages. It's nothing. Yeah. It's not huge in any way. Okay. I don't know. You had one that you wanted to mention. We have a few minutes. Do you want to just? You were going to talk about.
Yeah, I don't actually have it with me, and I'll just take a minute.
It's because I have the copy at home.
You're reading it? Okay.
Actually,
have you
Jake's
started it
reading
yet? It's amazing.
Exhalation.
Exhalation, which is the second collection of short stories by an American writer named Ted Chiang, has ended up. I read it just because it was on a lot of the best of 2019 lists.
Yeah.
It's 9 short stories, most of which have been published before, and they're quite variable in length. There's two of them are actually quite long. They're more like novellas. A couple of them are only like 4 or 5 pages long. They are, I have to say, they are among the most original ideas in fiction that I've read in a long time. They are science fiction, but they're more, I would kind of equate them to, if you've ever watched Black Mirror,
Right.
That's
which is
And if you haven't watched Black Mirror is a lot like
Twilight
Zone.
But they're not scary.
Creepier.
These are not scary stories by any means. But what they're doing is exploring technology. And the thing that's good about the show and also about these two is they're just far enough in the future that they're still believable.
Right.
They're plausible in some ways, but they're still like so out there in.
But they're these like thought experiments.
Really incredible. Like there is not a one of them that is not unbelievably thought provoking, and I might actually end up talking this in the future in more detail because.
Yeah. No, that's. I think that's gonna be. And from what I hear, they start off well, but they just get better and better and better.
Every one of them is
through.
fantastic.
Yeah. Okay, I'm just going to do a really quick plug for 2 weird and wonderful books. One called Follow Me to Ground by Sue Rainsford, and the second one called The Seep by Hannah Porter. And these 2 have just come out, have very similar covers, weirdly, although, and they're not weird and wonderful in exactly the same ways. This one is kind of folk tale meets fairy tale meets horror. This one is kind of wow, this one is a really hard one to explain. Fantasy, definitely, but speculative fiction, like what would happen if aliens kind of seeped into your culture rather than kind of coming in some big attack, and made everybody love each other and be completely connected. What could possibly go wrong there? So there's a lot going on in both of these books, and I may end up talking them at another date as well. But I wanted to put them out there for people to see. So one is called The Seep, and the other one is called Follow Me to Ground. And with that, I think we are finished for this month, and we again hope to invite you to, or hope to see you at our fireside chats on February 8th at the library. And next month, we'll be back again with more. See you then.